gentlemen, and thank you for joining us today and for what I hope will be an insightful conversation with our esteemed panelists about the role of art fairs in building global market. And we're obviously in the middle of trees amongst more than 200 exhibitors across 2 fairs, so it would be perhaps remiss if we could go too far into the role of galleries and artists, although that's integral to any fair and we're all aware of that, that's very clear. What I wanted to do today is push beyond those parameters and look at other vectors that buttress art fairs and hold them up. And I've identified 3 really sort of hinged around our amazing speakers that I think are integral to the success of any fair and that we'll be exploring in more detail. And the first is the notion of cultural philanthropy as active participants in developing art fairs and contributing to thriving ecosystems from which the art fairs evolve. The second is the role of the cityscape, the landscape, the cultural landscape in which fairs take place. And for that, I'll be discussing with Margaret 2 incredibly influential and impactful fairs across Hong Kong and Singapore and what they look like in the context of those cultural landscapes. And the third is, of course, the role of government in supporting the success of art fairs and why it matters. And there I'm looking at the wider concepts of the creative economy in countries and why it's important to enable those economies to grow and develop. And of course, all 3 vectors are interrelated, and actors across all 3 are featured in on it. Play and all the treatment is going and fluent. It'll be clear that the Doctorate. And so the process. That's all. Yes, super. There we go. Oh, yeah. Wonderful. So to begin with, we're going to start with, and I will this clever on introduction, Leonie Mann, who's head of VIP for Europe, Middle East and Africa. And in that capacity, of course, works very closely with cultural philanthropists that contribute to the life and success of frieze. And in particular, I wanted to begin by looking at the role of collectors such as Nicoletta Fiorucci, who together with Frieze has just launched the new art prize. Could you tell us, Leonie, in the context of cultural philanthropists and in particular Nicoletta to start with, a little bit more about this wonderful prize that has just launched this year?
Thank you, Diana. I'm so happy to be here. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. Well, Nicoletta, who many might know, is this incredible philanthropist and patron and collector, Italian. She's been based in London for the past sort of 20 years, has a beautiful exhibition space in London. She just opened a foundation in Venice earlier this year. And Nicoletta has been really, throughout her career as a patron, as a collector, always championed sort of uncommercial, sort of slightly, definitely not flat art mostly. And it was really in her mindset that, you know, everybody's talking about the crisis of the art market and everybody just wants to buy commercial and flat and colorful art. And she said, I don't want to just see young artists not taking risks anymore, you know, because that's really important, I think, for all of us. And also when you look around at the fair, artists need to explore, they need to experiment, they need to be able to create their own vision of why they're an artist and the questions that they're addressing today. So she launched this prize. She approached us 6 months ago and said, like, what do you think about a prize to encourage young artists to create something? We'll look at it beforehand, so the gallerist doesn't have to like ship something that's completely uncommercial, probably not very easy sellable, and bring it to Frieze, show it to people, because the amount of people passing through the tent is incredible, and that just gives them an incredible exposure. So Nicoletta launched this wonderful prize. It's the latest prize that we have at Frieze, and I think, I don't know, I've asked. It's been announced? I asked this morning, yeah. Anyway, well, there will be much more talk about it today. There's been many prizes, but Nicoletta has been really instrumental. She's been supporting Frieze, she's been supporting the London art scene for many, many years, and we can just applaud her. And I think she just shows the way for what philanthropy really should look like, could look like, and looking at really embracing art as an expression of our time, of creativity of young artists. And she really is a role model for many younger philanthropists and patrons. And I invite everybody, I think tomorrow there's a visit in her collection in the late afternoon. Go to the Frieze website, it's beautiful. When you go to Venice next year or earlier, she opened her foundation. So she is really, really absolutely extraordinary.
So Frieze, I think, you've highlighted, is a space also for artists to be able to produce ambitious new work and gain visibility amongst an incredible audience. But the amazing thing about Frieze has always also been how it mobilizes the entire city and expands beyond the fair to connect with new spaces as well as existing institutions and museums and so on. And London, of course, is the buzz at present with the newly opened Ibraz Art Centre, which I think shows the ever global face of London, and also why it remains relevant for these conversations around global art that happen here in London and alongside the fair. Could you tell us a little bit more about Ibraz?
Well, Ibraz, it's very interesting. So about a year ago, it keeps buzzing up there, all these new foundations, and it was still pretty much under wrap. And we were trying to explore what is happening, who are the people behind new projects. And the name Ibraz came up, and I knew about Ibraz obviously because it's a foundation and a museum in Tunisia, and it's been an online magazine for many, many years. And so we were very excited to see a young woman in her early 40s championing artists from North Africa, the Middle East, and creating really a community space. Because I think very clear about that this is not a museum where there's a collection on the wall. It is temporary exhibitions that really address mostly artists from the Middle East or the global majority. They have an incredible exhibition by Ibrahim Mohana in the show, and I invite everybody to go. There are talks. It's a very engaged foundation. There are talks. There's a library. There's a little cafeteria, and they really want to engage conversation. So the program, I think, is going to be very exciting. It just launched last weekend. It was really incredible, and it's also, I think, it shows that London remains a really vibrant place for global communities to come together. It's wonderful. We're talking about an Italian collector. Now we're talking about a Tunisian collector. We will talk about a Chinese collector in a minute, choosing London as their place of where they feel this can be shown, and it's not like a vanity project. It really is something that they want to share with a wider audience and their role as philanthropists and patrons.
I think that in that legal context, they were able to figure out the foundation, which is just opening this week as well.
Yeah.
Of course, they mentioned that they work closely with institutions and really thought about expanding curatorial practice and academic research and contributing to more equitable, inclusive and plural futures for contemporary art, which I think actually could have taken us wisely on from what you were talking about in terms of the role of Ibraz. Could you tell us more about Rosalie Foundation and its impact?
Yeah, so Jan opened a foundation 10 days ago in Fitzrovia. It's an incredible space. It's with a beautiful exhibition of a Chinese artist. And in the beginning, I think when Jan had moved to London, she's a very prolific and very prominent collector and supporter. I think she's involved with the Fina and the Gas work. So she's really a proper patron and philanthropist and the best possible way. And I think she just felt it was really important to create a dialogue and bring Pan-Asia into London. London has an incredible community of South Asians, Chinese, honestly Pan-Asia. And I think with her foundation, these voices will be given a platform to celebrate the people who from South or from Asia live in London, and also introduce the artists to an audience who might not have so much access if you don't travel to Asia. And again, I just come from another talk talking about philanthropists and institutions, and it was women at the forefront. Sorry, Magnus, but I'm just so proud to see all these incredible women taking their role as a patron and philanthropist and collector very, very seriously. And it's about sharing and bringing new voices to the forefront, giving young artists the opportunity to really be shown. And the art fairs obviously are an incredible platform. We, in my role as a head of VIP for Frieze, we try really to bring the best globally to Frieze in terms of artists, new voices, dialogues, collectors, introduce collectors to new voices, and really like a dialogue. We're a big, beautiful world, and we should, continue this incredible collaboration and just celebrate what unites us rather than what doesn't unite us.
And I think that's something London have always done really well.
And will continue to do so.
And so in the space where people come into these global conversations and are able to shift narratives and open up new possibilities of thinking for the future. But which brings us nicely, thank you very much, Leonie, for this insight. I think it brings us nicely onto you, Magnus, and thinking about, of course, the cultural landscape or the cityscape around fairs and how one impacts the other and the relationship between them. And you have an extensive background with fairs, and I've kind of got some of your key highlights up there. And just because I think we'll move directly on to one of the questions that I heard, which is, as the founder of the original Whole, which then of course became our Bible Whole, you had extensive experience in coming to a sort of dynamic landscape that was on the cusp of changing and having a key role really in shaping some of that change through the fair. Can you share some of your insights about your understanding of that and
thank you very much, first of all, for the invitation to be here. It's a great pleasure to be on this wonderful panel. It was such a privilege to have the opportunity to really iterate right from the outset what this art fair could be. We really had a blank piece of paper. This is Art Hong Kong back in 2007, which is when we were formulating the plan, and then the first edition happened in 2008. And so we really had to think, how were we going to build a picture for the fair? What was it going to be? And we thought that we could be, how could you be the best art fair for now? And we felt that you could be the best art fair in absolute terms, in that if what is perceived to be the best 100 galleries all come from Berlin, then you have 100 galleries from Berlin. Or you could try and be the most representative and have galleries, to almost be the Olympics of the art world, and to have galleries from all over the world so that there's the opportunity to discover new and different things. And we thought that that was a real opportunity for us to go down that route, because the year prior I'd had the pleasure of having a one-year contract to run commercial galleries to Berlin in Shanghai. And so that was the first time that I'd really lived outside of my West-centric upbringing and background. And so it's a real privilege to have the opportunity to travel around China and just to see that there was many different ways of looking at things, but also to try and engage with work that was from outside of my cultural upbringing. And that was really a revelation for me, a life-changing experience. And I thought that it would be really interesting if we could apply some of that to the art fair. And so as a founding principle of the fair, we made geographical diversity one of the three core values. Quality, geographical diversity, and accessibility were the three core values that we founded it on. And so we made the pledge that at least 50% of the galleries would come from the Asia Pacific. And I think as we traveled around Asia to try and persuade galleries to come and to communicate our ambitions, that really resonated, that there was going to be the opportunity to have a more equitable platform on which to connect with a wide audience.
And of course, Hong Kong has a deeply entrenched, art history or art histories with, incredible artists. But what was it about that particular time that made it the right place to launch a fair? What was it about the nature of Hong Kong at that time?
I think there was a lot of things that were coming together. I think that there was the rise in the interest in contemporary Chinese art that had been very hot in that kind of 2004 to 2006 period. And so I think there was a lot of interest there. I think there are a lot of reasons why Hong Kong made sense in terms of texts and in terms of its geographical catchment area and reach. The fact that English was commonly spoken and so on made it easy to navigate. But there's a lot going on within Hong Kong that wasn't more widely known, that there were these great initiatives, Asia Arts Archive and Parasite being two of them at that stage. But also really interesting work being produced by the artists, but it did seem that the art scene was quite siloed in a way, and it didn't feel that everything was connecting up together. There was a nascent gallery scene with some really fantastic pioneering galleries, but I think probably what Hong Kong at that stage was most famous for was for the auctions, because it was already the auction hub for Asia, so it asserted itself as a key trading hub already. So in a sense, it just seemed like the natural progression for there to be a major international art fair be located there, and we went for it. And then within 4 years, we're up to 255 galleries from 37 countries, 60,000 visitors, and caught the eye of Art Basel. So the fair was sold to Art Basel, I was sold to Art Basel, and became the founding director of Art Basel and Safwan.
And of course, from there you moved on to Singapore and launched, Art Singapore, which is, again, I think a fascinating cultural landscape to begin a fair in and to launch a fair in. What were the key markers for you that made Singapore a place to do that?
I think Singapore is an extraordinary opportunity, actually. I think Singapore is becoming more and more important in all of our lives without us yet realising. It's now really the only truly neutral territory in Asia. Americans are happy being there, Chinese are happy being there. And I think that's an incredibly strong attribute to have. Some of the former perceived disadvantages, such as distance from China, are now seeing this thing that perhaps is an advantage in a way, that it's out of the geopolitical firing line to a degree. But I think that over the last few years that the terminology has been shifting from Asia-Pacific to Indo-Pacific as India and South Asia become more important as well. And whereas Singapore couldn't really lay claim to be the capital of the Asia-Pacific, it's absolutely the de facto hub of the Indo-Pacific. And there's very, very strong diaspora populations there from right across Asia. More recently, it's become a real hub for wealth. It's always been the key private wealth management hub in Asia, but in the last 10 years or so, it's really taken off. And just by way of example, in 2016, there were 60 family offices in Singapore. Today, there's over 1,000. And the minimum viable assets you have to have under management to make a structure like that make sense is about $40 million US. Many of them are many times that. So I don't necessarily believe that money necessarily makes a market, but it certainly helps provide the context for the market to develop.
I would say, and perhaps, Tola, that gives us a chance to move on to you next, that with economic growth and development and exchange, you have, of course, cultural exchange and development, and you have the growth of the creative economy, which is essential, really, to the development of countries. And I think it makes sense for everyone to think about investing in that creative economy and providing opportunity. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit, in your capacity as an advisor to the Ministry of Art, Culture, Tourism and Creative Economy, a little bit more about that sort of strategic vision that Nigeria has in supporting its economy and creative economy.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's great to see you all. It's great to be here. So yes, Nigeria, it's the first time we had a new government a couple of years ago, a new president rather, and he was really keen to kind of single out the creative economy, culture and art and make it into one ministry. And in doing so, the minister, Hanachi Musawa, who you met, has been so excited and just really taken the challenge, ensuring that infrastructure is in place and funding is in place in terms of actually endorsing projects which private companies would actually jump on. So Nigeria, I don't know if most of you know, but it's a very, very young population. 6% of population are less than 30 years old. It's very vibrant, it's very creative. The music is sort of out there, the fashion. And I'm obviously in the visual arts and performing arts space. And we see a lot of amazing young artists, but there's definitely it's a young market. It's a lot of need for sort of infrastructure and the schools and just more guidance in terms of that. And I think she's sort of taking that on and is working with the ArtX and working with our art fair as well, which really is about emerging artists and how we can develop them, what we can do. Last year, Steve was looking at patronage. What does it mean to be a patron? Let's go back a second, actually. Good. Wonderful. Yes. So again, looking at the market, and a few collectors. So we explored this theme of from buyers to benefactors. What does it mean to be a patronage in this time in Nigeria? And the few collectors out there. That's also how Kumbo in the middle there, who has been a humongous supporter of the art fair and also of the collaboration with Abu Dhabi as well. So it's an emerging market. It's really young. It's really, really exciting. The sky's the limit. I think the collaboration that
is perhaps a good move we talk about, because I think Magnus was sort of hinting with Singapore that what's quite interesting is perhaps non-traditional centres for art and production or knowledge production about art histories and art, and sort of not the sort of traditional centres for the art market globally. What you're seeing is, bilateral, multilateral agreements where people are working together to grow those markets and grow that sort of knowledge about this art history, the knowledge economy. And what we're doing, Abu Dhabi Art, together with you, with the ministry, is thinking about relations between Nigeria and the UAE and how we can, because the UAE also values the creative economy, has signaled incredible investment in all this sort of cultural industry in the UAE, and places culture at the heart of its vision for the future development of the nation. And it sort of makes sense, therefore, that we're looking as sort of co-participants in this sort of plan, or in this kind of vision of the creative economy that helps everyone, that benefits everyone, that provides opportunity, and that we're looking at collaborating through the fair with a focus on 7 galleries from Nigeria that you've worked really closely on, and that will be presenting works by Nigerian emerging and established artists, building up audiences for their work in the UAE, and building up their market through this direct relationship that we're now working on. So I wonder if you could say a little bit more of one of the artists that will be showing there about.
Absolutely. I think it's really exciting for Nigerian galleries to be part of this opportunity. As you know, the minister has been very attentive about. I think Abu Dhabi makes so much sense, because I think timing-wise, alignment-wise, there's so much, should we say, huge investment in the culture space. There are like 6 or 7 museums coming up at the moment. And I think we are also at the point where people are interested in content, in West Africa, particularly the art. So I just think the timing was really great. I think the opportunity for you to move beyond the kind of local market as well, which can sometimes be quite challenging when you're based in Lagos. This work we do locally, regionally, but I think when you go into the Middle East, it's super exciting. It's new access. It's a chance for galleries to see what other galleries are doing globally. It's great for the artists as well to have their works out there, and also meet obviously a new collector base as well. So everyone is really, really excited about this. I think it's going to be really transformative in the way we look at art and we kind of position ourselves as well. Because I think sometimes it's quite eternal having such a young market. You're not able to always look out to see what's going on. So I think it'll be really, really helpful. So we're very grateful for their collaboration, and I think everyone's very excited.
Well, I think what's really coming out here is, this decentering of sort of artistic production, of creativity in terms of market representation as well, so that you're having all of these different centres where the market's growing and where people are investing and where people are thinking about how to centre all their, sort of local art ecosystems in global, sort of relations of networks, and how to expand beyond the local into the global. And of course, whilst we've looked at, for example, the UAE and Nigeria and sort of having our own independent efforts together to kind of do that work and push that forward, London does still remain in many ways an integral part of those global conversations, and a place where a lot of those conversations happen. We're all engaged in these global conversations from these different centres. And I think what's really important to think about as a sort of closing question for you is this seminal exhibition at Tate Modern here in London, which is, the Nigerian modernism. I know the ministry supported it a little bit as well. Could you tell us more about that exhibition?
Yeah, so that opened last week, which is incredible. It had, I've never been to a private opening with so many people. Is this really a private viewing? But it was really amazing because obviously the UK and Nigeria have close links for colonial past, etc. So I think looking at the context of Nigerian art history, in which is presented by the creator, actually Osai Bonsu, who was actually Ghanaian. But he did an excellent job of presenting the works. We see so many contemporary Nigerian artists now, Winkasha Barry, Mujuka, and so many artists, you know. I think it's good for people to kind of see where it's coming from. And I think also when you look at the way the work's presented, there's so many ideologies coming out of that kind of post-colonial Nigeria and pre-colonial Nigeria, and the responses to what we've been taught, and then what we identify as what is actually Nigerian, and the different schools of thought. So you have the Suka school, the Oshobo school, and all of these different schools around Nigeria are always exploring who are we really? And for so many years, we still are our kind of primitive, not primitive, I mean our indigenous ideas were kind of suppressed. And so there's a lot of, the context of it is actually exploring that. I think it's done it really well. You all have to go and do the exhibition. It's absolutely amazing. So it's just gives a really good context to understand what Nigeria is about and what we went through and why the works are like this. I mean, Ben Omonwo was one of our biggest exports, as you probably know. He's one of the, he got it, and he sort of painted the Queen and, back in the 50s and 60s. And so his works are also displayed there. The ministry is supported by loaning some of the works from the National Collection as well. So it just gives a very good context, understanding what happened in Nigeria sort of early 20th century all the way through to the 70s. So if you're interested, I think it would be a good thing to go to, and it will help you to understand the kind of the contemporary Nigerian art scene as well.
Well, I mean, I think really what's come up from all of these contributions is that we're living in a time where countries are really coming up with post-colonial words. It's about who they are and where they come from and what their priority inspirations are for the future. And that it all works through collaboration, through establishing equity in global narratives, through that distribution of information in traditional centres such as ours and in new emerging centres such as we. There are many questions, I'm sure, our audience have around this, but before I invite the audience for questions, I wonder if you had any questions for Helen.
Let's see. Well, that's your answer. In terms of the art fair landscape, how is the domestic support base in terms of the collector base developing? Like, is that sort of becoming broader, or is it still a little bit of a challenge?
It's been a bit of a challenge. We do have our Art Week coming up, which is the leading fair's art act is quite small still. And then we also do a plus 234 art fair, which is, I think, is a pipeline to making that one a bigger fair eventually. But it is small, and there's room for it to really grow actually, with more art education, with more programming, and that's what we're trying to do at this fair. So there's an amazing opportunity and the interest. I think we're just finding that you have such amazing quality of art here. Just sort of engage, more in it. And that's happening slowly. So the potential is actually, you think you'll come into Nigeria? No, so I think the potential is really exciting. I think the quality, I think, is what is, to me, is really exceptional. I'm having studied art history here for so many years, gone back to see what's out there. I think it's an exciting space to be now. And it's just original. It's original. It's different. The stories are different. They're engaging. They're youthful. They're local. They're global. To mix, And then Nigerians, have ties to the UK and been trained here. And for their storytelling is usually around their culture and their experiences. And as we know, the young ones the culture is actually becoming one globally. But, where am I situated? How am I telling my own story in those different sort of things that are going on in the world as a Nigerian? So, yeah, the quad thing.
So I invite the audience, if you've got any questions, we'd love to hear from you. If you whack your hand away and a microphone will come your way. This is a very informal conversation, so don't be shy.
Cool. and blind, but it's but
They've been Hi, my name's Julia Nagel. I was lucky enough to come to Lagos to help work on the Benong One painting that's in Tate Moderns. Absolutely loved my visit. I've also, the only other place I've really been to is Ghana, and I know there's quite a lot happening there as well. And I wondered how much is it Nigerian and how much is it West African, or how does that work?
Well, Nigeria is like 220 million people, and Ghana is about 50. And so we are very strong in the region. So Nigeria is kind of dominates the region, but there's a lot of amazing work. Also, speaking of West Africa, Ivory Coast, I was at Art Fair earlier on in May. Lots of interesting work come out of there. And obviously Dakar as well in Senegal. They have the biennial that happens every couple of years, And so that's also really, really interesting. So the expression is different, but they have a bit of a French influence. But Nigeria is the biggest country by far. So Nigeria does lead the way of West Africa and Africa in general.
Clear? That we've got another question moving it back.
let's see. Bang.
Hi everyone. Thank you so much. This has been amazing. I'm Charlotte Swain. I work for the Art Fund here in UK. And I just had a question going back to the original conversation that Liam, you shared around philanthropy in the art market. And I was curious, as we see kind of globally, in certain areas of like the public art sector being defunded, etc., what role do you think art markets and particularly art fairs have to play in ensuring that continued growth? And what do you think that future philanthropy looks like?
Well,
Big question.
well, it's interesting with Singapore. Just we have one example of something where private funding is coming in to really support the museums and so on. So we have the Singapore Art Museum times Art SG Acquisition Fund, and two mainland Chinese collectors who recently relocated to Singapore, Pure Chen and Carmen Lee, has provided funds for 150,000 Singapore dollars per year for 3 years for the museum to acquire work from the art fair, so their permanent collection. And that is something that hasn't really been happening in Singapore before. So I think that's a kind of a great example of where private philanthropy is actually stepping in and stepping up to the plate. In terms of education and so on as well, we have this year a new initiative called the TVS Art Initiative for South Asian Art, and this is being sponsored by a newcomer to Singapore from India called Tara Benu. She's from the family that own TVS Motor, which is the largest manufacturer of motorcycles in India. And she has funded 2 initiatives for us. One is for us to be able to hire a locally based VIP relations representative to engage with the non-resident Indian diaspora audience in Singapore to help to get them interested in arts and culture and to pull them closer to the fair. And then the second is to try and encourage more wider engagement with South Asian art. It's enabled us to hire a curator who can help to put the spotlight on the Indian material at the fair and South Asian material at the fair. And so we've appointed Srinivasa Aditya Moppadevi from the Kiran Nandar Museum in Delhi. So it's I think those are, again, 2 initiatives where actually private individuals are trying to contribute to the ecosystem, largely to the art fair directly, but also to the broader ecosystem.
Not to put one of our guests on the spot, but here among us today is Stifani, who has the Wrist Art Foundation in Abu Dhabi and is very much a private cultural philanthropist who's helping build up the sort of art working system through that. I wonder if Shakira will pull you into this conversation and to share some of your thinking about the role of private philanthropy.
Thank you, Diana, for putting me on the spot there. But just from the Abu Dhabi perspective, I'm one who was born and brought up in Abu Dhabi, and it is such a culturally diverse country. While I was growing up, there were always people who celebrated so many festivals and, from their home countries. So for example, being from India, we celebrated our versions of Christmas and New Year's, Diwali and Onam and all of those festivals in there. So considering coming from an ecosystem where all these cultures exist together, how do you then use art and culture to bring them together in a space like Abu Dhabi, where there is a beautiful mix and melting pot of not just Abu Dhabi and people from Abu Dhabi, Emiratis, but also all these new people from various cultures coming in, and to have them on one table and conversing and putting these conversations together through art and culture, I think is extremely important. In our space, we've had artists from Nigeria, South Africa, Ghana, talking through their works to people from the Emirates and from India and from Vietnam and Philippines and Germany and all of these countries. And these conversations, I think, are really what brings us as people together and really have these important conversations.
Are also put just to add, I think for us in Nigeria, it's as I said, it's quite a small market, but I want to note that we do have a particular partnership or sponsor that Osonho Okundo Foundation, who's a sponsor for both the Plus 234 Art Fair and the galleries are going to Abu Dhabi as well. And so he's doing so much in the space, and it's really commendable. But we certainly need to have a lot more people kind of rising up the challenge. So I think with him doing that, we hope that more people kind of jump on board. But it is a lot of educating needs to be done to understand the real importance of just supporting that industry and creating structures that will make it long-lasting to the ones that are coming out.
I mean, I would say that fairs are often described as platforms, but they're as much communities where everyone has a stake and supports them and enables them to thrive. And it wouldn't be possible without those communities around the world. Perhaps that's a good place to stop. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. We'll take it to our career for all the full content.